Okay, let's go ahead and learn about arrays. We're going to do a 1D array, and this is called determining the grades. And we're going to go ahead and create a project. We're going to call it the grades array. If you look at your PDF assignment, basically we're going to use a loop to prompt the user. Of course, this is going to be a GUI app. And while we're prompting the user, we're going to get that data and put it in the array. Then we're going to go ahead and use another loop to go ahead and traverse the array and determine the sum, the largest, the smallest, and the average. And finally, we'll go ahead and build an output string and display it in a message dialog. So let's go ahead and get started here. Let me start NetBeans up. And let's go ahead and create a new project. Java application, next. And I'm going to call this grades array. Putting it on the desktop, and I'm getting rid of the package statement. Unfinish. All right, so I'm going to get rid of the needless comments. I need to do this to get my head screwed on. I don't know why stuff is to me is just distracting. I'm not going to align the curly brackets. It's another one of my compulsions. I'm going to let you go ahead and put in the general comments at the top, and I'm just going to concentrate on the code. If you want to put in specific comments, you can do that as well. Since you know this is going to be a GUI app, let's go ahead and get our import statement out of the way. We're going to go ahead and import the swing package, specifically the GOption pane class. Okay. And then come into main. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to prompt the user for the number of scores. Using an input dialog. I could just press tab here and then put in the arguments. Number of scores, colon. Let's go ahead and terminate this line. It's just barely going over the red line. I'll go ahead and press enter here anyway. So the next thing we'll do is, we're going to have to go ahead and parse that into a numeric. So int number. We'll use the integer class. And parse int. And it gets the string and puts it in a variable called number. Getting a little error there because I somewhere or another put in a minus sign instead of an equal sign. I've got a new keyboard. It's a small keyboard. Still getting used to it. I usually use the full size keyboards. So I've had it for about 2 months now. I still haven't gotten the hang of it yet. But sooner or later, I'll get it. So after I go ahead and get this number, what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to use that to go ahead and create the array. When we do that, we're going to go ahead and use square brackets to identify the array. We're going to use the new keyword because it's an object. And we're going to pass it number. And of course, why? Because we're saying, hey, how many scores? That's what we're going to use to dimension the array. That's going to set the array up. Okay, that's going to create the array for us. So then the next thing we're going to go ahead and do is use a loop to go ahead and receive input from a dialog and load it into the array. So we'll say for. The condition that we're going to work with is we're going to go ahead and start at index 0, since we know arrays start at index 0. And we're going to go all the way up to number. And we're going to increment it by using I++. In here, we'll put the opening and closing for the for loop. Inside of the for loop, we're going to receive input, and then we're going to load it into the array. So we'll use the response variable again. So we'll say response gets JOption pane. We're going to have a show input dialog, and we're going to say null, and then we're going to go ahead and say enter the score, right? Enter score. We're going to do a little magic here. I'm going to concatenate. I'm going to use the index, and I'm going to add 1 to it. Well, why 1? Well, if we're starting at if we're using a starting index of 0, I certainly can't say enter in score 0. If I'm going to use the index, I want to go ahead and say enter score 1. So I add 1 to the index. Okay. So we start at 0 and go all the way up to the number. So if I say I'm going to enter in 5, if I start at 0, it's going to go all the way up to 4, and that's still 5. So we're going to load it into the array now. So scores of I. Notice this is an assignment statement. And it's an assignment statement because we assign whatever is on the left to what's on the right. Well, what's on the right this time is an array, and we're traversing the array by means of the index. So the first time we come in here, it's index of 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and we're getting that number, which is a string, converting it to a number and putting it in the array. All right. So that's pretty much our first loop. We're going to go underneath this loop, and we're going to get ready for some more processing. We're going to build another loop. But before we do that, we need to initialize a bunch of little variables that we're going to end up using. We're going to be calculating the sum, the largest, the smallest, and we're also going to be accumulating the grade. So we'll need to initialize all of those variables. So we'll say int sum, and we'll initialize that to 0. Int the largest. We'll do a little magic here. We're going to set that to the first element in the array. And I'll be talking a little bit more about that in just a second. Same thing with the smallest. This is all part of the statistics that we're going to end up showing. I'm going to set that to the first element in the array, and then we're going to go ahead and just use brute force and compare every single one against every single one. And that when we do that, we'll end up with the largest and the smallest. I'll show you how that magic happens in just a second. Initialize the average to 0 as well. And now we'll go ahead and declare our variables. And we'll initialize those as well. You know, I could copy this over and over and over again. You're either going to do it right or you're going to end up doing it wrong and creating a, little editing nightmare for yourself. But if you're good at that, you could have just copied this and just changed the A to B, C, D kind of thing. It's just, some little shortcuts that programmers usually do. So that's what we've done. We've initialized all these variables, and now we're going to go ahead and use a loop, and we're going to end up, finding all these statistics. So let's start our next loop. Our condition is again going to be, we're going to start at the bottom, which is index is 0. And the condition is we're going to go, we're going to loop as long as, in this case, we're going to use scores.length. That's really important to use that rather than a wild number or a magic number, as they're many times called. I'll discuss that in more detail in just a minute. But this for loop here, so what we're doing is we're going to go ahead and initialize I. And we use I to correspond with the word index. It really doesn't matter what you call it, but we've standardized it to I. So we're going to start at 0, and we're going to go all the way up to scores.length. Scores.length gives us the length of the array. Now, if I say I'm going to have 5 scores, then it's going to go all the way up to 5, right? Does it include 5 when we loop because we're saying less than? We still end up looping 5 times because we start at 0. Index of 0, and then it goes to 1, 2, 3, 4, which would give us the 5 elements. So then what we're going to do is we're going to find sum. So sum would be sum gets sum plus scores of I. And that gives us what's inside of the first element, adds it to sum, which is 0. So then sum is 0 plus whatever is in scores of I. And as we iterate through this, it will give us the sum. First time I saw this, I thought it was magic. That was great. We're going to do some more brute force stats. We're going to go ahead and check what's inside of each element and compare it to the largest. And if it is larger, then we'll assign that element to the largest variable. Beautiful. We'll have another if. In this particular case, we're going to go the opposite way. And in this case, we'll assign that value to smallest. Okay. So this is brute force comparison. Okay. After we do that, we're going to go ahead and engage in a little else if ladder to increment the counters for A, B, C, and D. So I'll say if scores of I is greater than or equal to 90, and scores of I is less than or equal to 100. Then what do we want done? We're going to go ahead and increment the grade counter for A. Now you could just go ahead and say grade A plus plus if you're inclined to use the shortest way to do this. Let's go ahead and do an else if now. Condition is scores of I. In this particular case, we're going to say if it's greater than or equal to 80, and scores of I less than or equal to 89. A lot of my students want to put a space in between here, and that would make it wrong. So in this particular case, we're going to go ahead and increment B. See how this style here is equivalent to this style. These two, line 41 and line 42, pretty much is the same idea. They're incrementing. Now, if I want to live dangerously, I could go ahead and just copy this. I haven't done any copying and pasting, and I do that all the time. So I'm going to copy this and then just paste it down below. That's going to be my C. And, if I want to continue living dangerously, I'll do another one to do my D on here. So in this case, I just changed that 80 to a 70. And it's going to go all the way to a 79. It's got to make sense. The one down here, we're going to go ahead and say 60 all the way to 69. In this case, we're incrementing the D and the C. Okay. The only one we need now is the F. So let's go ahead and add that one. So in this particular case, if I wanted to be real compulsive, I could say greater than or equal to 0, less than or equal to 59. Then in that case, I would be incrementing the grade F variable. So that's what's going to happen inside of my for loop. Right? This is the ending of the for loop. Pressing enter. And now what we're going to do is compute the average. And we want to go ahead and use length. We don't want to go ahead and use a while number, because otherwise, because the way this program works is that it keeps asking you for, like, how many scores do you want to input. So it's always going to be different. So we have to use this length property of the array when we're going to go ahead and compute the average. Now we're going to go ahead and build our output string. You could do it like the way she likes to do it in the book, which is, as you're building your show message dialog, you can go ahead and build it there, or you can just build your string and then pass it. I like to go ahead and build a string first. Call it output. I could just continue to use response. Doesn't really matter. So this, the sum is, and concatenate that with sum. Now I'm going to show you a slightly different way of doing this. I'm just going to just do a small amount here and then pass it right away so that I can start testing this, and I'll come back and finish building this. In this case, we're passing output. Okay, so I need to spend more time on line 53 to build this output string. Let me just look this over, make sure everything's okay. Okay, you're going to be adding your general comments at the top. So the way this works is, this is a GUI app. It's going to ask the user for the number of scores. It's going to then get that string and convert it to a number. It's going to use that number to dimension the array, a 1D array. Then we're going to use a loop to get the data into the array. Now, this is an assignment statement. Whatever's on the right gets assigned to what's on the left. Then we go ahead and declare a bunch of placeholders on here. And we use a loop to go ahead and find the sum, the largest, the smallest, and then we use an else if ladder to increment the grade counters. So before we use these grade counters, we went ahead and initialized them to 0 and then incremented them if the condition is satisfied. If I were to run this right now, I could do a little bit of testing, check for spelling and stuff like that. So let's go ahead and see what happens here. So how many scores? I usually like to go, I like to try, I want to test everything. So I'm going to just say 5. So enter score 1. See how that's where I get that +1 business on the prompt. So if I just type in a 90, and I'm going to do 80, seems to be incrementing right, 70, 60, and 50. I should see A, B, C, D, F. Of course, I haven't written the complete output string. I'll come back to that later. I just want to test to see how everything is looking so far. Now it says the sum is 350. So things seem to be working okay. I kind of like jumped the gun a little bit, but it gives me a little sense of completion here. So now all I have to do now is come back over here and finish up this. I'm going to use an abbreviated operator here to continue to concatenate onto the output string. And this technique, I like it because it creates a string, and then I just add on to that string. And if there's an error, I always know what line it's on. I'll show you what I'm talking about here. Let's go ahead and type the next line. So output, and see what I do now. I'm going to put plus equals to. And in this case, we're going to go down a line on this string. So I'm going to go ahead and say, \n, and I'm going to go ahead and say the average F is, and concatenate that with average. All right? Go down another line and do the same thing again. Plus equals, it's a shorthand abbreviated operator. I'm going to go down a line with the escape code called \n. And then after the average, we'll say the largest score is. And we'll add a plus sign, call it largest. And then we'll go back to the PDF and make sure that my output looks like what's required in the PDF. I want to make sure that I'm satisfying the requirements. Could live life dangerously here, and if I select the first line here, I could do a Control-C, go down again. In this case, I'm just going to go ahead and use the smallest. It may not work out too good, but we'll see. And instead of saying the largest, we would say the smallest. So if you're really good at this detail, you can go ahead and save a little bit of time. So now we're going to go ahead and count up the number of A's, B's, C's, D's. So we'll say number of A's, colon, space, and concatenate that with grade A. All right. Now I'm going to live life dangerous as I've told you before. The way I do this is I go right in front of the line, hold down the Shift key and press the N key, then do a Control-C, go down the line, do a Control-V. In this case, I'm just going to change the A to a B, and the A to a B again. Let's go ahead and do this one more time. Change that to a C and a C. Let's go ahead and do this another time. Change this to a D and a D. And of course, that's that sad F. Never made an F. Wonder what that feels like. All right, so I think I've got it all done. Okay. I'm going to go back and look at the PDF. The PDF, if you look at it, it says enter the number of scores. I've got a question mark. The example here shows 5, enter in 5. So I then enter the test data. And then it just says the sum is, the average is, the largest score is. Oh, the smallest score is, no colons there, but then it goes to a number of A's, B's, C's, and D's, etc. So let's go ahead and run it and test it. Number of scores, 5. Score 1, put in a 90, and then an 80, and then a 70, and then a 60, and a 50. I should get one of each one. If I don't, it's because those relational operators, I have to go and check them, make sure I put them in the right direction. Maybe my numbers are wrong, or maybe when I copy and paste, there's all different kinds of ways to go wrong if you don't copy and paste and edit right. Okay, so here it is. The lowest is 50. See, I only use numbers that I can do in my head. The average is 70. I don't need a calculator for that. And it's catching A, B, C, D, and F. So if you use like wild numbers here, you know, unless your brain is really good, you could do the math in your head. You don't really know whether this program is working right or not, you know? So I'm pretty sure that I've satisfied all of the conditions. So about the only things you need to do here to complete this exercise would be for you to go ahead and put in your general comments. If you don't want to put in some specific comments, you don't need to, but I think it's laid out pretty good. You know, so other than that, you know, you can continue to test it, just, you know, until you're positive that it works right. I forgot. I think I entered in too many. Yeah, that worked out. Okay, very good. I'm confident that this is working right. So this is an example of using arrays. I hope that you got the idea. Professor